Let's talk about the U.S. women's national team. They crashed out of the World Cup the first time they hadn't made it to at least the semifinals in the history of the competition. This is the 9th ever Women's World Cup. And we lost to Sweden, who really sent us a note early on in the Olympics back in 2021, where they beat us in the group stages 3-0. That was Vlatko Andonovski's first big major tournament in charge of the U.S. women. And we didn't do very well in that competition. We ended up getting a bronze. And it felt kind of similar to what we saw here, where did he know his best 11? Did he roll out the right team? Is he saying the right things? And you're going to probably look back on this World Cup very similar to that, where there was more talent on display, or we had more and we didn't utilize it enough, or didn't play the right players. And so really disappointing to crash out in this way. And I'll also add is that we probably should have beat Sweden. I thought we deserved to beat Sweden. Musovic, the goalkeeper for Sweden, was standing on her head, making unreal saves. She is the backup at Chelsea in the WSL in England. And maybe she's going to be pushing for first team minutes after that performance. We'll see how far Sweden goes and how she continues to play. But it was the game against Portugal that we probably deserved to lose. And I know that Alyssa Nair, the goalkeeper, who was an absolute rock star in the game against Sweden and then penalties as well, taking one, slammed it home. And I wish goalkeepers would take more penalties. We know they practice it a lot, Heath. Mm-hmm. But she stepped up and made hers when others didn't, unfortunately. And that's how it goes. It's a bit of a coin flip. We had our chances. We should just finish it in regulation. But she said after that, it's a game of millimeters. We got knocked out of the World Cup because of a millimeter. And I thought, well, you actually got into the knockout rounds because of a millimeter, because it hit the post when Portugal had that opportunity at the end. So I don't know. Maybe the universe is balancing out a little bit. But my big takeaway is that in the conversation being had down here is that the gap is closing between the top nations and the ones that are emerging and getting more investment and getting more infrastructure and more professional leagues in their respective countries. I don't know if it's closing. I think it's starting to be leveled. Of course, in some conversations, the Jamaicas and the Haitis and the CONCACAF region, and we can talk about Morocco being the first Arab nation to qualify for a Women's World Cup and getting into the knockout round. So they lost to France deservedly last night, or today, wherever you're listening to this. But I think the gap has been closed. And I'm very curious, Heath, as to how U.S. soccer, from a U.S. women's national team perspective, responds to this, because it is clear as it's ever been. And there's been signs of it along the way, but now you can't refute the evidence. And so, yeah, give me your thoughts on what we do moving forward, because I know we have the talent, but how do you, and very similar to the men, how do we funnel that talent in the right way? How do we get them around, especially when they're younger players? The scouting, is NWSL strong enough? Are they starting to do everything? Because these other leagues around the world are getting stronger too. And we were seeing like a Lindsay Horan. She doesn't play in NWSL. She plays for Lyon in France and wants to play in the Champions League, like a lot of these players do. And it's starting to feel very similar to the men's game.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
so I went on like a 3-minute rant there.
No. I think it's a few things. Let me start with this, Jimmy. People that hedged on the women not winning the World Cup, like, that's not a hedge. Like, 3 in a row is
it was always going to be difficult,
right? Yeah. It's about the pathway. It's about the performances. Now, if you remove that, right, the people that were like, "I told you so," like, obviously, like the odds of that not coming true are pretty damn good. But when you look at the way in which they performed stylistically, you look at some of the other nations, and I look at Portugal quite a bit, where I just go, wow, there's a lot of technical players there. There's a lot of like players with an energy and a confidence and a technique that I really admire and enjoyed. And then you add that to the fight, right? I don't think the women's national team is going to win World Cups on fight anymore, on collective fighting spirit, being more bigger, faster, stronger than everyone. I think there is a different type of play that has to happen here. Having said that, if you look at the type of players that we are producing that are young players, they are creative players. They are, they are big, fast, and strong, but they're also technical. They are also crafty. They are also creative-minded players, right? I don't think we've stifled that. I think there's a massive issue with player development on the girls' side, right? We know the issues that exist within the girls' sport and the even more extreme pay-to-play model and the lack of just sort of infrastructure that exists out there. That's maybe getting grandfathered in to other things around the world that already have the infrastructure on the men's side, and they're leveraging that, right? You're seeing a lot of the clubs in England and other places just using a lot of the infrastructure that exists to make sure that they're doing things the right way for the women. But at a youth level, it's a completely different conversation. I do think the playing field is leveled in a lot of ways, and it's going to take something different. But I do believe that we also have a platform in NWSL that is going to continue to give young players opportunities to develop, and our next generations are going to be okay. You know, I think they're going to be all right. Now, our current national team, who knows? The infrastructure, the changing of the guard, the changing of generations, I think that's going to continue to evolve because they're shifting away from a club-based national team type of thing to a national team, right? Where you play your club ball and then you have your national team stuff. And it needs to be merit-based. You need to have players that are hungry. You don't need to have players that are, I guess, sworn in through contract statuses. And we're moving towards all of that. And I really like that for the future. We just got caught at the wrong time with some bad performances, and this team is out, right? And sometimes you need to get punched in the face like that to realize as a coaching staff where you were wrong, as a developmental nation where you went wrong, as a tactical system and how you're going to compete with the rest of the world where you went wrong, to be humbled. And so all of that is to say that I still like where we're going, but to think that like the only success is whether or not we win the World Cup, this is a huge eye opener. You know, it is a game of margins now, and there are teams that not necessarily are as good as us, but are sure as hell going to make our lives miserable for 90 minutes. And I
jump in and say that it feels like some of the response has been the sky is falling for the U.S. Women's National Team. And I think when you have this type of loss and this type of tournament, you have to reflect on what we could have done better to make sure that this doesn't happen. My concern is not about the Sweden game. I don't even care that we missed some penalties. It's unfortunate. That's part of it. And to what you're saying, to your point, I feel like anytime we're entering into this now, as much as we're revered as the U.S. Women's National Team by a lot of the other programs, and it's already been, Aslani came out from Sweden and was talking with Tobin Heath about how much respect the U.S. Women's National Team should get globally for all the good things that they're doing to help grow the game and how that inspires other countries to want to do the same.
Yeah,
and
they've
gives them
set
a voice.
the standard. They've set the standard, which has changed the world.
Now that they're the victims of the success. No question. No question. I think the big issue for me was a lack of identity. I didn't know if Vlatko knew what his best 11 was. And it seemed like he unlocked it in the round of 16 where he needed somebody next to Andy Sullivan. He needed to play a double six. And all of a sudden that unlocked things. You got Lindsey Horan a little bit closer, a little higher up the field. And that seemed to unlock some things. And that looked good. And we looked like we played well. We were up for the fight and all the other things that we're known for. And it was unfortunate we lost. The fact that, and on defense, we got to talk about it. I think Vlatko is a very good defensive coach, which makes me think he might be a better assistant coach than he is a head coach. Because from what I hear personality-wise, he tries to be friends with all the players. And I think there's an element that you can have of that, but I still feel like you have to be a coach in tough moments and not everybody's buddy. Mm-hmm. And that might have worked against him in terms of man management, woman management, player management. And so there's probably a lot to dissect here. I don't think Vlatko is the guy moving forward. After the Olympics, I was ready to move on from Vlatko because it just looked like he didn't have what we needed. So I'm a little disappointed in that. But we didn't score a goal. So defensively, I should go back. Defensively, we gave up 2 shots on goal in 4 games. 2 shots on goal in 4 games is insane. That is doing it on that side of the ball. We only gave up 1 goal, but we didn't score either. And we weren't consistently dangerous. And when I look at that front 3, you have an absolute legend in Alex Morgan, who is one of our most clutch players in history. You have Sophia Smith, who is coming in as red hot as you can and tearing up NWSL, and Trinity Rodman, who is undeniable in her talent. And we saw that in Sweden, against Sweden in particular. But we couldn't score. And that frustrated me, and I'm sure everybody else watching, that we're so close. And I don't know if there was enough courage in terms of making changes, because I think when Sophia Smith went to the 9 when Alex Morgan came out against Sweden, you saw her come alive in a different way. And if it's that evident, what are you seeing in training? I know it'd be impossible to drop Alex Morgan, or at least feel like it'd be impossible to drop Alex Morgan. I was asking for her to drop into the 10 spot, and you could have made it all work. I questioned Vlatko. I assume he's going to be done here pretty soon. I assume they're going to announce it. And I wonder who, and I guess this is the big question for everybody, and this will be our final thought as we talk about this, Heath. What kind of coach do we need stylistically, philosophically, to come in and take this team back to where it can go? I know you're going to have to graduate some of the players. Yeah. Megan, most likely Julie Ertz, Alex Morgan. I assume Alex Morgan. I mean, the Olympics are only 1 year away, so maybe Alex and others might be holding on to do that before they announce their retirement. But there are other younger players that I think are ready to take on responsibility. And so I wonder what you think. What kind of coach should we be looking for? And I don't know if you know any names. I mean, Serena Wiegman, who coaches England, would be my top choice. She's an amazing coach, but I don't think she's going to come. And I don't know if we'd be willing to pay her the money that she would deserve. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that as our final thought?
Yeah, I think for me, it's almost the perfect storm that we saw in 2018. Obviously not the magnitude of the failure, but for the women's standard of that they've set as the world champions, certainly feels like that, to be able to push out the old guard and move a whole new generation in and use this window to really empower the next gen who maybe they feel welcomed, maybe they don't. I don't know. I'm not in those circles of those that are going to leave this World Cup with a chip on their shoulder because they didn't play enough or they didn't get opportunities or whatever. It's just a good chance to be able to go younger and really empower that next generation to be the ones that are going to be like, yeah, you want to dance, you want to sing, you want to whatever, you want to be big, bold personalities, then go and do it and prove it on the field, right? As the next generation of superstars, because the U.S. women's national team produces global superstars. And now it's up for the next ones to push out the old generation and really prove themselves. In terms of coaching, you know, it's tough to say. We have a lot of technical players, and I would love to see a little bit more of that rolled into the system versus just like steamrolling teams. And that's not to say there isn't tactics and there isn't technique. But again, when I see the patterns of play and the rhythm of some of these other teams at the World Cup and this one, I was like, man, in, out the other side, 20, 30 passes combining, you know, where the next ball is going to be, the technique of a player being able to break free and change the game on their own, like those types of things. We have that quality of player, but now it has to come like the tactics and the style of play that can bring out the most of those players.
Yeah, we lacked identity. That was, I just didn't know what to expect, like which version of the U.S. is going to show up. And when I see the Spains and Japans, and I know that Spain took a beating from Japan, but they still have an identity, and maybe they were a little bit too true to that. And you do have to be tactically flexible, right? You have to be able to adapt to what's happening in game. We see this from the U.S. men as well. We want them to be able to solve problems in game without having their hands held and not to say our players aren't capable of it or they're not trying, but it just doesn't always feel like it's coming off the way that we want. So I think Vlatko has to go. I'm probably not alone in that, and I look forward to seeing who U.S. Soccer hires. Another big opportunity here for Cindy Parlow Cone and Matt Crocker as they look to reshape U.S. Soccer on both sides. I mean, based on them rehiring Greg Berhalter, I guess we could all expect Jill Ellis to come back at some point.
I bet they're all saying, "Woo! Isn't this fun that we signed up for?"